inside.
So now we know that Kelsey did make it to Target. She was there and she was safe and going about her business, doing her shopping. We see Kelsey walk around the store,
She was on the phone
collect
with her mom.
the items that she was purchasing.
She talks to Missy for just a few more seconds, hangs up the phone.
She pays for her items, and we see
June 2nd, 2007. It was a warm and bright Saturday afternoon in Overland Park, Kansas. For most families, it was an ordinary weekend, shopping trips, kids running through parking lots, and couples picking out gifts. For 18-year-old Kelsey and Smith, it was no different. She had just graduated from high school, full of dreams, and full of life. That day, she headed to her local Target store to buy a simple anniversary gift for her boyfriend, something sweet, something thoughtful, the kind of errand every teenager runs without a second thought. But what should have been nothing more than a quick shopping trip would become her final moments of freedom. Within minutes, Kelsey's path would cross with a predator, a man she had never met, a stranger who had chosen her for reasons as senseless as they were sinister. That chance encounter would set into motion a tragedy that would horrify a community, devastate a family, and leave an entire nation questioning how such evil could hide in plain sight. This is not just the story of a young woman's life cut short. It is the story of innocence shattered in the most ordinary of places, a store, a parking lot, a busy Saturday afternoon. It is a chilling reminder of how quickly a normal day can spiral into a nightmare, and how none of us are ever truly prepared for the darkness that sometimes lurks just a few steps behind us. Cameras inside the Target store captured Kelsey moving casually through the aisles. She looked just like any other teenager on a summer afternoon, smiling, carefree, glancing over shelves as she searched for the perfect anniversary gift for her boyfriend. There was nothing unusual, nothing alarming. She was simply living her life, enjoying her freedom, and thinking only of the simple joy of surprising someone she loved. But what Kelsey did not see, what no shopper around her noticed, was that she was not alone. Just a few steps behind, in aisle after aisle, a pair of eyes locked onto her every move. His name was Edwin Hall. He was 26 years old, a stranger to Kelsey, but in those moments, he had already decided her fate. This was not chance. He had not stumbled across her by accident. He had come here hunting, searching for someone vulnerable, someone he could overpower. And in his twisted mind, Kelsey Smith, an 18-year-old girl full of life and promise, was the one he chose. The surveillance footage, now infamous, would later reveal this horrifying detail: the ordinary setting of a store aisle had become the hunting ground of a predator. Kelsey never saw the danger trailing her. She never knew that every step she took was leading her closer to a trap she could not escape. Outside the store, the sun was still high, the parking lot filled with shoppers coming and going. Cars pulled in and out, shopping carts rolled across the pavement, and families passed by without a second thought. It was the kind of busy, everyday scene that feels safe, too public, too ordinary for anything truly sinister to unfold. But for Kelsey Smith, this was the moment when her ordinary Saturday turned into her last. As she walked toward her car, arms full, unaware of the danger behind her, Edwin Hall closed in. In a matter of seconds, the predator revealed himself. Hall struck with cold precision, forcing Kelsey into her own vehicle. It happened in broad daylight, in full view of the world, and yet no one understood what they had just witnessed. To most, it looked like nothing more than two people entering a car. But for Kelsey, it was the beginning of a nightmare she could not escape. Minutes later, the car she had driven to Target was found abandoned across the street, sitting in a Macy's parking lot. The doors were locked. The keys were gone. Her purse, her belongings, all left behind. But Kelsey was nowhere. In that instant, the unimaginable became real. An 18-year-old girl had been stolen from the safety of a crowded store, and not a single person had been able to stop it. For days, the community of Overland Park came together in a way few had ever seen before. Strangers became search partners, neighbors became investigators. Volunteers walked through open fields, combed through wooded areas, and checked every roadside ditch in the desperate hope of finding Kelsey alive. Flyers with her picture covered lampposts, shop windows, and church doors. Candlelight vigils lit up the nights, each flame representing hope that she would come home. But behind the scenes, investigators were fighting their own battle. They knew Kelsey's cell phone could be the key to unlocking her location. Every ping from a tower, every trace of movement, could have narrowed the search. But that lifeline was tangled in red tape. The phone company delayed releasing the data, citing legal requirements, while precious hours slipped away. And as her parents waited, helpless and desperate, time was quietly running out for their daughter. On the fourth day, the search ended in heartbreak. Kelsey's body was discovered in a wooded area near Longview Lake, across the state line in Missouri. The scene told a story too cruel to comprehend. She had been sexually assaulted, and strangled with her own belt. The brutality was staggering. What began as a routine trip to the store had ended in an act of violence so vicious, it shocked the nation. The community that had prayed for her safe return was left shattered. And her parents, who had clung to hope, were forced to confront the unbearable truth, that their daughter's life had been stolen in the most horrifying way imaginable. Investigators quickly identified Edwin Roy Hall, a 26-year-old father of two, after fingerprints found inside Kelsey's abandoned car matched his records. To the outside world, Hall seemed like an ordinary man, living with his wife and children just a short drive away from the Target store. But when detectives began digging into his background, a darker picture emerged. He had grown up in troubled circumstances, displayed violent tendencies from a young age, and had an unsettling presence that neighbors later admitted made them uneasy. Still, he had no serious criminal record, nothing that would have placed him on law enforcement's radar as a potential threat. That anonymity made him even more dangerous. In the days after Kelsey's disappearance, police confronted Hall with the mounting evidence. The interrogation room became the stage where his mask finally slipped. At first, he denied everything, but his lies crumbled quickly. The fingerprints were undeniable, the timeline airtight. Confronted with the facts, Hall admitted he had stalked Kelsey through the aisles of Target, watching her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. When investigators asked him the haunting question, "Why her?" his answer sent shockwaves through the room. He said, flatly and without hesitation, "Because I liked her legs." As if that weren't horrifying enough, he went further, admitting that he thought she looked like a 12-year-old child. Detectives who had handled dozens of murders before were left stunned by the casual way he reduced an 18-year-old girl, full of life and promise, to a mere object of his twisted impulse. His words stripped Kelsey of her humanity in the same way his actions had stolen her life. When the details of his confession became public, the community was shaken to its core. Parents who once felt safe shopping with their children in broad daylight began to question every errand, every store visit. How could something so brutal happen in such a normal, crowded place? It wasn't just the crime itself that terrified people, it was the chilling simplicity of Hall's reasoning. To say he chose her because of her legs exposed a disturbing reality. Predators don't need complicated motives, they only need opportunity. For Kelsey's family, the horror of hearing those words in court was indescribable. Her father, Greg Smith, later said the pain of knowing his daughter had been hunted like prey was a wound that could never heal. Hall eventually pleaded guilty to aggravated kidnapping, rape, sodomy, and first-degree murder. By accepting the plea deal, he avoided the death penalty but guaranteed that he would spend the rest of his life in prison without parole. In the courtroom, as the judge read out his sentence, Kelsey's parents and sisters sat in silent grief, knowing justice had been served but that nothing could ever bring their daughter back. The story of Edwin Hall stands out not only for its brutality but for its ordinariness. He wasn't a shadowy figure lurking in a dark alley. He was a man shopping in the same store as hundreds of others, blending in until the moment he chose to act. His words, "I liked her legs," echo as one of the most chilling confessions in modern true crime history, a reminder of how quickly innocence can be stolen by someone hiding in plain sight. For the Smith family, those words are a lifetime sentence of their own, forcing them to relive the nightmare every time they remember the ordinary Saturday afternoon when Kelsey walked into Target, never knowing that a predator was walking in behind her. Facing overwhelming evidence, Edwin Hall made the decision to plead guilty to the horrifying crimes he had committed against Kelsey Smith: murder, kidnapping, rape, and sodomy. On paper, the plea agreement seemed straightforward. He would admit his guilt, avoid the uncertainty of a trial, and in return, the state would spare him the death penalty. To anyone watching from the outside, it might have seemed like a legal formality, but for Kelsey's family, the moment was far more complex and emotionally wrenching. The courtroom was charged with a heavy, almost unbearable tension, as reporters, legal personnel, and family members filled the space, each aware of the gravity of what was about to unfold. The walls seemed to echo with the weight of the crime itself, the whispers of disbelief, and the collective sorrow of a community trying to process the incomprehensible. As Hall entered the courtroom, he carried himself with a calmness that belied the horror of his actions. To those who had followed the investigation, his demeanor was chilling, a stark reminder that monsters often hide behind the facade of normalcy. Kelsey's parents, Greg and Amy Smith, sat at the edge of their seats, hands gripping each other tightly, eyes fixed on the man who had shattered their lives. Every breath in the room felt heavy, as if the air itself carried the grief, fear, and anger that none of them could escape. When Hall's lawyer formally announced the guilty plea, there was a collective pause, a silence thick enough to feel like it pressed against everyone present. Justice, in that moment, had been served in a legal sense, yet the emotional chasm it left behind was immeasurable. The judge read aloud the details of the plea, the charges meticulously enumerated: first-degree murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and sodomy. Each word struck like a hammer, echoing in the hearts of the listeners. For the court, the procedure was routine, but for Kelsey's family, each term was a brutal reminder of their daughter's stolen life, her last moments, and the unimaginable pain she endured. Hall would not face execution, but life imprisonment without the possibility of parole meant he would never again walk free in the world he had terrorized. Yet, despite the permanence of the sentence, there was a hollow ache in the hearts of Kelsey's parents. No prison, no legal language, no measure of punishment could ever compensate for the light that had been extinguished, for the daughter they would never hold again, or the simple future she had been robbed of. In the courtroom, Hall maintained a detached, almost clinical demeanor, as if recounting the events of that day were no different than describing a routine errand. He did not show remorse, and that absence of emotion carved deep wounds into everyone who listened. Kelsey's mother turned away at times, unable to watch the man who had destroyed her daughter speak as if it were nothing. Her father's fists clenched, knuckles white, as memories of the abduction replayed in his mind, the phone call Kelsey made from inside Target, the frantic search through the parking lot, the realization that she was gone. Every person present felt a sense of helplessness that legal proceedings could never resolve. Beyond the courtroom walls, the community wrestled with its own shock and grief. Neighbors, friends, and strangers alike followed the proceedings closely, reading every transcript, every news article, trying to comprehend how an ordinary man, a father, could commit such unspeakable acts. Their horror was compounded by the knowledge that Kelsey had been in a public place, surrounded by people, and yet the predator had struck with precision and cruelty. The case became a cautionary tale, a tragic reminder of vulnerability, and the frightening reality that evil often hides behind the veneer of normality. For the Smith family, the moment Hall was sentenced to life in prison was bittersweet. On one hand, it provided a measure of closure, an assurance that he would never harm another child, never walk free, never escape accountability. On the other hand, closure was an illusion. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a vibrant young woman with dreams, laughter, and a future that could never be reclaimed. The sentence could not bring back her voice, her smiles, her presence at family gatherings, or the simple joy of seeing her live her life. The legal system had done its part, but the emotional devastation remained raw, permanent, and inescapable. Even years later, the words uttered during that trial haunted the family and the public alike. Hall's confession, his chilling admission that he had targeted Kelsey because he liked her legs, was a phrase that reverberated through news cycles, true crime forums, and social media, becoming a symbol of the cold, calculating nature of predators. To hear it in the context of a courtroom, surrounded by the weight of justice, only amplified the horror. It underscored the profound randomness and cruelty of the crime, reminding everyone that Kelsey had been chosen not for who she was, but for the arbitrary predilections of a man devoid of empathy. In the end, the sentencing marked both an ending and a beginning. For Hall, it meant confinement, a life devoid of freedom, but for Kelsey's family, it meant confronting a lifetime of grief, advocacy, and memory. They channeled their pain into action, eventually working to create laws to prevent similar tragedies, ensuring that Kelsey's name would live on not only as a victim, but as. In the aftermath of Kelsey's murder, her parents, Greg and Amy Smith, were consumed by grief, yet they refused to let her death be meaningless. Every day, they faced the unbearable reality that their daughter's life had been stolen, that no punishment could ever restore her laughter, her dreams, or the simple moments of joy she would never experience. But amid the heartbreak, they found a determination stronger than despair, a resolve to ensure that other families would not endure the same nightmare. Channeling their sorrow into action, they became advocates for change, fighting tirelessly to create legislation that could save lives. Their efforts culminated in the Kelsey Smith Act, a law that allows law enforcement to obtain cell phone location data immediately in emergencies involving missing persons, without the delays that had plagued Kelsey's case. The act became a lifeline for investigators across the nation, a tool that could shorten search times, improve response, and ultimately save lives. For Greg and Amy, nothing could bring Kelsey back, nothing could erase the trauma of that Saturday afternoon, but the law they helped pass ensured that her tragedy would prevent others from facing the same fate. Kelsey's story, though born from horror, became a beacon of hope, reminder that even in the wake of unimaginable loss, positive change can emerge and lives can be saved. In her memory, Kelsey Smith was only 18, a young woman full of promise, dreams, and the kind of innocence that makes her story all the more heartbreaking. Her life, full of laughter, love, and ambition, was cut short in an ordinary place on an ordinary day, a reminder of how fragile safety can truly be, and how quickly the familiar can turn into a scene of unimaginable horror. Yet, in the midst of tragedy, there is a profound lesson. Kelsey should not be remembered solely for the crime that stole her future, for the way her story shook a community and shocked a nation. She should be remembered for the light she brought into the lives of those around her, her kindness, her smile, the small joys she shared with family and friends. Even in death, her story sparked change, inspiring laws that could save lives and raising awareness about the dangers that lurk in places we assume are safe. Kelsey's legacy is not one of fear, but of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the memory of a life well lived can continue to shine and guide others, ensuring that her spirit, her light, and her story will never be forgotten.